Welcome on the podcast today. We got Mark Brigman, who, let's see, we met, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, we were both part of a coffee group, and
Couple crazy Lee Summit guys.
Yeah, man, and Mark. And funny actually. So I met Mark before we started going to this coffee group, but Mark wrote this book, Partnernomics, which I would highly recommend reading. I not only have read the book, but I went through, I forget how long it was 10 weeks maybe?
Yep.
10-week program with a group of maybe 5 or 6 other people,
yep,
where we got together every morning and talked, kind of went through the structure process about what's in this book. And we're going to dive into it because I think this is something that is maybe overlooked is the right word. I mean, we were just talking about it before we got on the air. Everybody knows what partnering is, but few put in the work to sort of define what it's really all about. So, tell our audience about you, why you wrote this book, what your background is.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, thanks first of all for having me on here.
Of course,
definitely appreciate it. Like a lot of people, at least here from the Kansas City area, I started my career at Sprint.
Yeah,
and was really lucky to quickly find this world of partnering, of biz dev, and so you going and growing years into your career, and have a lot of buddies went to college with, that worked with at Sprint and outside, that were in sales roles.
Yeah.
And they would frequently say, yeah, I went to this new sales boot camp where we've adopted this new sales training program, this new model. Mm-hmm. And I would always go back to our leadership and say, well, where is that for partnering? Where is that for strategic partnering for this world that we live in? And the answer was always, well, it's trial and error. You'll learn the same way that everybody else did.
Yeah.
And you'll get 10 years into your career and man, you'll become a ninja. I was like, well, I don't want to wait 10 years.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And so I continually was saying, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a faster way to learn how to do this. And so then just in a parallel track to my corporate career, I jumped into a college research program, and all of my research questions were centered around partnership success.
Was it like a Ph.D. program?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I was always just kind of wanting to understand, what are the imperatives for partnership success? Mm-hmm. Partnerships that fail, why do they fail? Partnerships that are awesome and endure for decades, why, how can it be replicated? Yeah. And then what are the overarching processes? Almost think of like a flow chart. Yeah. What are these different tools and pieces that come into this partnering process that companies either don't do or don't do well? And how can you teach partnering? And if so, how? What's the playbook? And that's what I didn't realize it at the time, but I set out to build kind of this Uber playbook of how to do partnering well.
Yeah. Well, so when you walked in, you recognized Jim. So you worked with Jimmy Passantino.
Yeah.
Is one of our key guys, man. He's great. And hearing his stories from Sprint, great company, and at a company that big, it requires, internal partnering, right? And I used to hear people from Sprint a lot talk about how, well, we partnered with this other organization, or, we might partner with another internal group. And it always struck me that a company of that size to think about partnering in that way, like in that structured of a manner, was always interesting to me, because like my career has always been at smaller companies. Like 200 people is the biggest company I've ever worked for, so frankly, I've never really dug into partnering in terms of like the structure of it, which was really what I enjoyed, taking your, reading the book and taking your course. You sort of opened my eyes to the different types of partnerships and the different types of like the agreements that you would structure and the nuances of those things. I'm curious, when you wrote this book, did you, what was the motive of writing the book? Did you feel like, well, I'm going to write the book, and then on top of that, I'm going to build a business? Was that always the plan?
Yeah, awesome question. So after I finished my dissertation, I finally survived that gauntlet. I didn't care if I ever wrote like one page of text again in my life, right? So I did not set out to write a book. I started to work with companies. I envisioned myself in the company of just being kind of a hired gun, go into so let's say mid-tier companies, mid-sized companies, and evaluate, essentially audit their process, this whole partnering thing, and then just help them put some different components, processes, tools in place of how to do partnering. And, so went into a couple different companies, and then I guess I was surprised at just how, just like we talked about before we, flipped on record, everyone does partnering. Everyone can form partnerships, AKA you can sign a contract, but most companies don't do it well. I mean, there's countless studies that say that the success rate of partnerships is about 30% over the course of 2 years.
So help me understand that. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
like they fall apart, they don't work. They what's the math behind it?
Yeah, so all the above, and most of the studies, what the criteria are, 2 years into the relationship, right after signing the dotted line, 2 years into the relationship, if you could turn back time, would you have signed the deal again?
Would you have done it again?
Yeah. So did you get the value out of the relationship that you envisioned?
Right.
70% of the time, it is no. And so that just begs the question, why?
Yeah. And I'm guessing that it has a lot to do with expectations weren't set up front properly. So as you
can imagine, there are many, many, many reasons why.
Yeah.
But I think the way to boil it down, there's one side of partnerships comes down to that interpersonal side of collaborating, right? Of working together, building trusted relationships. And we address that framework of how to just see if you can truly work with people, right? We say that, companies don't do business with companies, people do business with people, right? It's all about relationships and it's about people. Yeah. And so what does it take and what are the imperatives of building relationships with each other? Yeah. And so that's kind of one component. And then the other component is truly those more corporate organization-sized success practices. So for example, I was really fascinated how whenever I started to really dig into failed partnerships as a topic, and I wanted to uncover what does that really look like. I'm
glad you got into this because one of the things that I really enjoy is to dig into. When we're doing digital marketing programs for people, like one of the things that I find the most useful is to figure out what people hate about a given brand, right? Or dig into why they're not using my brand. I do Google searches around like my brand plus, sucks. Yeah. Similar thing, where you're digging into, why do these things not work? And I actually just made this note. Like, I'm curious if you can tell me some stories about partnerships gone wrong or what you've learned from maybe, are there any sort of high profile cases in academia that are big partnerships that have gone wrong and what you learn from them?
Yes, unfortunately, there are a bunch of them. There's no shortage of failed partnerships to look at that are out there. But I think one of the things that's most important to look at is whenever you look at failed partnerships, so many times the analysis starts at the signed contract. And so when two companies get together, it seems that most every time these, the executives, the powers that be, they understand the resource. I'll call it just generically, resource that each company brings to the party. Right. They either have a technology, they have some proprietary intellectual property, they have access to, or they kind of own or almost kind of have a corner on a certain market segment. Yeah. And so that's the resource that they're after. Well, that's one piece of the value play that comes into the partnership. But what about everything that comes before that? Yeah. Having a similar culture, being able to work together, being strategically aligned with where those companies are trying to go. Yep. A lot of times we teach one of those components we need to get is alignment, right? Alignment of each other. Yep. But the fact of the matter is you really can't get alignment with another company. You assess alignment with another company.
Help me understand that.
Yep. This is a really, really important
because a lot of people think they might have alignment. Like if you go back to your comment about, the different types of partnerships, and the reason the company might partner is that I might have a product, you might have a channel, right? Yeah. But just because I have some product that can be sold in your channel, and we think we're aligned, what has to happen to get alignment right? I mean, you just said that you can't have it. Help me understand that.
You can't like pull it and get it as you go, right? It's like you need to do a front end evaluation, right? So we've all just heard I love using the analogies of marriage, right? We call partnerships the marriage of business. Mm-hmm. And so if your spouse hates to cook, they hate to do laundry, and they expect you to mow the yard every 3 days, and you're like, nope, and nope. Yeah.
That dog
You're
don't
not
hunt.
going to change that person, right? Yeah, that dog doesn't hunt. You're not going to change that person. So whenever you want to have access to, let's say, GoPro, Red Bull, right?
Okay.
2 companies, very different products, right?
Yeah.
One's video and the other's sports energy drink.
Yeah.
Very different products, but basically the identical target market.
Yeah.
Right? These adrenaline junkies, and that's how their brands are positioned. And so they want access to one another's, they want to continue to brand and to work within that market segment, just to continue to kind of to saturate it with their brands. But if one is very risk averse, one is very slow to move, these different cultural pieces, 12 layers of bureaucracy to make a decision on how we're going to run this next advertising campaign. Yeah. That may not be congruent. That may not be aligned with where we're trying to go. One company may want to build to sell as soon as possible. The other company may want to build for long-term valuation. Yeah. So there's so much more than just the resource that we're looking for. Yeah. So we say that at least 50% of partnership success on the end starts before the contract's ever signed. Yeah.
How do you, I agree 100%. I've always found it hard to get it. Like it seems a lot of in business partnerships or even client relationships, a lot of times when you go to that level of detail on the front end, it can be perceived as waste. Like, we don't need to worry about that right now. Let's just get going. Like we got an opportunity. We want to start selling, or we want to start building, or, whatever the case may be. How do you convince the stakeholders to slow down and be like, let's think this through, and answer the tough questions. Like when you I always link it back to writing an operating agreement. Whenever you do an operating agreement for a business, and it's probably the same in a joint venture, any type of partnership, like you got to define things like you just said. What happens if one partner wants out? Like, what do we do in that scenario? How do you convince 2 stakeholders to do the dirty work at the front?
Yeah, great question. And number one, you convince yourself and you convince your own company to do it after getting burned so many times. Yeah. And if you're linked up with a partner that is mature, they've gone down this road a couple of times, they will really appreciate this process. Yeah. That is a huge part of the problem is that we don't do it. Yeah. And it's so easy to get really excited about what we can do together. And us getting access to your quote unquote resource, you getting access to our resource, whatever that is, and wanting to just get on with it. Yeah. I totally get it. I totally understand that. But again, if you don't have the foundation built and you're not speaking the same language on the front end, you'll never even have a chance to reap the benefits of having that put together.
Yeah. Interesting. So tell me about the companies that are, tell me about the companies that use your services and how they're structured. Are they larger companies? And I'd love to, and we can edit this part out if you're not in a position where you can talk about it, but I'd love to hear about your Andreessen Horowitz experience. I know you probably can't get too far into detail about it. We'll strip it out if you can't, but talk to me about the companies that you're working with.
Yeah. So it's the types of companies that we're working with range all the way from Fortune 100s, the Dells of the world.
Really? Nice.
All the way down to, companies that you just never have heard of that
small
only
businesses.
have 20, 30 employees maybe, and probably some even less.
Okay.
So all companies can leverage the power of partnership, but there's right ways to do it, and there's wrong ways to do it. And it's one of the things that I want to make sure that I set the stage for on partnerships is to understand that partnerships are on a continuum, just like our clients are on a continuum. We have some customers that we love. It's the whole Pareto 80-20, right? Yeah. And so the thing that we need to understand first about partnerships, and it's interesting because I have conversations all day long, literally with people all over the world about partnerships. Some of these people have been doing it for 30 years, but it's funny how many conversations, and it's well over half, how many of these conversations start off with, okay, Mark, so how do you define partnerships? You know, I mean, how many times do you have a conversation with somebody and they're like, Ryan, how do you define digital marketing? Yeah. How do you define a website? You know, you probably don't start conversations that way necessarily, but I think it's important. And frankly, it kind of tells me a lot about that person's knowledge and experience. But let me share this because this is really important. Partnerships are on a continuum. And on one side, you have very transactional relationships. I was hoping you would go here. Yeah. So what does that mean? You know, sales, procurement, supply chain management. Do those companies partner? Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really the lifeblood of organizations, especially without sales, you have no organization. Yeah. Sales is what gives you, the lifeblood and the resources, the revenue, to be able to place some bets and to go do some strategic work, which is on the other end of the continuum. Yeah. Right. And so that transactional side, the playbook is already written, very predictable. That's the key. It's predictable. Yeah. The opposite end of the spectrum is truly strategic partnerships. Yeah. The word strategy, sometimes I kind of hate it because I think it's so overused. Would you put collaborative sort of in a... Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, okay. That's exactly what it is. It's highly collaborative. So what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of interaction. Well, why is there interaction? Yeah. It's because the key is it has to include some innovation. Yeah. And the innovation by definition means it's new. Yeah. There's not a script. There's high risk. There's opportunities to be messy. Yeah. But, and marketing people love this, right? It's about creating that differentiation. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where the magic happens, is on the strategic side, on that right side. Yeah. So whenever you start to talk about partnerships and, partnerships failing or not, or, being successful, or we want to partner, the first question I have is, what is the type of partnership? Because I'm trying to peg it. Is it in the middle of that continuum? Is it transactional on the left side? Because it needs to be managed. It needs to be nurtured and built and structured based upon that. Yeah, I would say that whether or not a client engagement for our agency group works comes down to whether or not that concept is understood. If we can do transactional and we can do collaborative, but if one partner thinks we're in a collaborative relationship and the other thinks that it's transactional or vice versa, shit can go haywire quick. We talk about alignments, and you can have misalignment. Yeah, for sure. That's it. For sure. Because then you start getting into if it's transactional, it's, I'm buying 10 hours a week for X number of dollars, but then if the person thinks it's collaborative, then they're like, well, we can just go over a little bit because it's a really important. The transactional person's saying, well, no, we're at 10. We'll talk to you next week. It's a very different deal. It's kind of that upfront expectations. Yeah, for sure. You have to get out there and set it. So are you typically working with CEOs, COOs, leaders of sales organizations, or all the above? All the above, as you can imagine. The smallest of companies. So you mentioned Andreessen Horowitz, and doing work with some of their smaller companies. Yeah. It's at typically the founder CEO level, right? And for those who don't know, Andreessen Horowitz, really premier venture capital company. I mean, every startup that came out of Silicon Valley, they were in it. Right? Yeah, just a phenomenal organization with an amazing track record. Yeah, and Mark Andreessen, look him up, right? Yep. Or Ben Horowitz. Yeah. Actually, Ben has written a couple of really good books. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is the one that I read a long time ago. Really great read. Yeah.
And then he has another one that I can't think of the name of the book, but there's another guy that I don't know if he's still on their team or not. Again, Andrew Chen.
Yeah, he kind of runs their podcast, doesn't he? Or
dude.
Yeah,
that guy is wicked.
It's gold on it.
Smart.
Yeah.
I mean, that if there is one blog over the last several years that his writing is so in detail, in terms of like he was like the original growth marketer. Really, really good stuff. So, anyways, so how did they find you? Was it because of the book?
Yeah, it was because of the book. Yeah, so
nice.
they decided to
we need to write a book.
Exactly. They decided really smart to build out a couple coaching teams.
Okay.
Right. So one of them was a partnering coaching team,
okay.
right, that they staffed, and then digital marketing.
That makes sense. Okay.
Coaching team. And so they were internal resources to then turn around and work with their, I'm going to get this number wrong, but I want to say 250 plus companies.
So all their portfolio companies.
Yeah, all their portfolio companies to work with them. And they were looking for a playbook.
Nice.
A process. How do we do this thing? And so their team kind of went out to Amazon, did their thing, scoured the lands. We've heard back from folks from REI Sports. There's tons of different companies.
Dude, that's awesome.
It's been wild, because I find myself on Zoom. People reach out, LinkedIn, whatever. Hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Jump on there like, dude, I love your book. It was a lifesaver.
That's awesome.
A gentleman from Harvard Publishing, they stood up their partnering program using the Partnernomics framework. And so it's cool. It's really neat.
Dude, you should be proud of that, man.
It's been super cool.
That is freaking really cool, man. Well, so tell me about what what you're doing to market your business. This is, I'm guessing it's a small business still, right? You got you.
Absolutely. So just a handful of us that are working.
But last couple of years has been crazy. The website, you keep putting out content. I am super impressed. Content is no joke.
Yeah.
Like it is a freaking commitment. It is hard to make it work, like to sit down and say, I'm going to do content every day, all day. And like Ryan's sitting there shaking his head, man. It's no BS.
Yeah. And nobody has to tell you guys that, right? You guys live right in the middle of it.
I'm impressed, man. It's your content is one, it's consistent. Two, when I say this, I mean this in the best way possible. It all looks the same. Yeah. Like when I see a post or a podcast episode, it's.
I need to get some coaching from you as well. You let me know.
I was going to ask you for coaching, man. I was going to flip the script on you because your stuff is good, man. I whenever I see it in LinkedIn, I know it's you. It's great. So how's it been? Like, what have you learned?
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. And I have to give the props to the gentleman behind it, Tyler Pittman, on our team. Actually, a fairly new college grad.
Cool.
But man, just somebody that's not afraid, not afraid to jump in, not afraid to learn. And for us, I've just really been lucky and been blessed. And what I mean by that specifically, as far as the content is, we were building, this is stepping back years ago, we knew we wanted to build out digital courses because going back to the Andreessen Horowitz conversation, he's like, hey, Mark, I can't fly people to Kansas City to take your courses. Yeah. You got to bring it online, brother, a few years ago. So then we went down the path of building the courses online. So we have 3 different courses, 6 hours each, about 20, 21 hours of content. And in doing that,
and what does that stack look like? Like, what tools are you using there? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So
if you can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. WordPress is kind of our standard based website. Yeah. And then we have LearnDash as our learning management system.
WordPress plugin.
WordPress plugin. And then we've just done a bunch of customization kind of behind that.
Okay.
To really tool it the way that we want. And it's pretty much, it's all video based.
Yeah.
And then so the courses themselves, I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but I'm not a big fan of talking head. Yeah. The newsman.
Yep.
So we went with more of a sketched, storyboarded approach.
Yeah.
And interviews.
Okay.
We call them thought leader conversations.
Yep.
So I've been super lucky to be able to reach out to folks like Bernie Brenner, the founder of TrueCar. I think you might have saw some of these videos as well.
Yep.
Jerry Porras, the book Built to Last, one of the business Bibles, as I call it.
Yeah.
There's just so many awesome people that have given us the opportunity to interview them.
Yeah.
and then we'll turn around and use that content, just little snippets. I mean, you guys know this, right?
Yep.
Just do little snippets that are relevant to our, our followers, but just kind of setting that stuff out there. And what's been really cool is then whenever, we've interviewed these best-selling authors, these high-powered CEOs and founders, and we set our brand next to them, we pull brand equity from it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we've seen on LinkedIn, I think we've gone from a couple hundred followers to around 900 or more now. And it's, it's growing exponentially on that clip.
You seen site traffic from it too?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Seeing site traffic, and this is where I'm going to be embarrassed to say, we're just blowing and going, we're just hauling ass, and companies, like Dell and others are wanting to work with us, other Fortune 500s. So
that's awesome, man.
That tells me we're doing something right. So we just keep going.
Well, so here's the thing, the dirty little secret is you got to just move, like it. And I've done this myself. It's like, you can't overthink it, right? Like so many people in business, and I've done it myself so many times I can't even hardly count, to just analysis paralysis, wanting to have the whole damn thing set up perfectly, and I got to have all my funnels built right, and I got to have an analytics platform so that I can do this and track that, and what happens if this happens, and at the end of the day, that all that stuff's important, but you got to just freaking start. Just go.
Man, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have a confession to make. So Partnernomics is business number 6 for me. I started my first one when I was 18, right after I graduated. I was 17, right after I graduated from high school. And the first 6, in retrospect, even though I sold half of them, I would call them failures.
Yeah.
But I think that looking back now, I wasn't patient enough. 2 things. Number 1, I wasn't patient enough. I didn't realize it took this long. I mean, we're 6 years into this at Partnernomics.
Yeah. People want it to be a slot machine.
Oh my gosh, but it never is, right? It's like a 1 in a million is.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, just being patient is so critical.
You got to play the long game.
And man. I never was. I didn't get that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
It's hard, man. I mean, I've done it, more times I've failed. I mean, you can't even count. As I get older, I'm starting to take a longer view, starting to realize that okay, well, if we're going to get serious about building an audience, it ain't going to happen with 4 videos, right. Talk to me in 2 years and maybe we'll have an audience, and when we talk to clients about that, and I'm down for ROI. I'm all about ROI. And my last business, the one that pivoted into this agency, Measure Media, was all about analytics and ROI and be able to understand the math. And that's all super important. But if there's no movement, there is no math.
Yeah.
If 0 divided by 0 is 0.
Yeah.
So if you're not actively posting and creating conversations and engaging, and then you're not going to have a conversion to track.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm super happy to see you out there doing it. I think it's great. The name brand is amazing. I was curious. I was going to ask you about that. Is that something you bought?
Gosh.
Did you buy that domain 10 years ago and sit on it for a while or what?
No. I kind of, believe it or not, I stumbled into it.
Really?
Right. So from an education perspective, I have a bachelor's and master's in economics. That's where I started.
Okay.
So you'd think this name Partnernomics would just be a natural, just to step into from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Actually, our company started off being named Fidelis One, which is kind of a play on me being in the Marine Corps.
Right.
It translates to always faithful.
Okay.
And so to me, that's really important whenever it comes to relationships.
So you started the company and it was called Fidelis One.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then I was, get a year or 2 into the business. I was like, man, I gotta share the playbook. I have to share my methodology. I have to share my philosophies so that I can hand it over to somebody and they can decide if they want to work with me or not. But this is the way I'm going to roll. Make sure that we can work together. Yeah. And so that's really what Partnernomics is all about.
So do you think about it as a product?
The book?
Just the whole thing, the book, the courses, do you Yeah, like how do you do?
I view it as a methodology, a product, but it's really designed to be a dynamic methodology, I guess. It's not just about the book Partnernomics. It's not just about the 3 online courses. It's not just about the online community to participate in. It's not just about the podcast, but it's everything.
Yeah.
Put together to try to truly be, it's the solutions base, right? It's not a product, it's not a service. It's trying to give what I attempted and we are attempting to build is what I wish I would have had day one being in a partnering role at Sprint.
Okay.
Because I was so
just trying to figure it out on the fly. And when was that? Like years wise?
Early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started there late 90s and then was able to transition into this, the role of biz dev, which is very entrepreneurial in nature, doing partnerships. Whenever people hear the word biz dev, frequently today they think of sales, specifically sales, but really I'm talking about partnering, doing longer term, bigger strategic stuff, making these crazy ass phones do all the things that they do today.
Yeah.
Well, in the late 90s, early 2000s, they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, texting wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were tasked with, was signing literally thousands and thousands and thousands of partnerships to put music on there, to put video on there, to put GPS on there, to put.
So where does vendor management fall into that? I mean, do those lines blur at all?
Awesome question. And yes, they do blur. And so going back to what we were talking about, partnerships are on a continuum.
Okay.
So on the left side, on that transactional side, where you have, supply chain management, procurement, the people buying your insurance and your carpet and your cleaning services and your toilet paper, that's very transactional, where you have a 500-page master services agreement that outlines how you'll work together. Where I really enjoyed working was on the opposite end of that, which is really about collaboration, building trusted relationships, having this vision wrapped around some innovation. How in the hell can we build, what you have at home with your cable TV? How can we build that same thing on the smartphone? Can we do that?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be a person that got to lead that group, Sprint TV, for 2.5 years.
Nice.
And learned so much from it. There were times when we had to interact with supply chain management, procurement, whenever we got involved in more of like hardware deals, doing stuff with, the Ciscos of the world and those folks. And it was a very different mindset.
Oh, I bet.
Very, very different mindset. And that's what really made me appreciate the role that I was in, but it really made me understand there's no shortage of even procurement, supply chain management courses that you can go to.
Yeah.
But I never could find anything for truly strategic, highly innovative partnering.
Interesting. So how's the thing structured? I mean, I'm looking at your site right now. There's a free version that you can get in the community, and then you got the premium stuff with the courses and all of that. Tell me how if I'm running a 20-person sales team right now, and we want to start getting into strategic partnerships, how do I start?
Yep. So people can hop onto the platform, partnernomics.com, and sign up for a free account and engage in the community. So what we kind of are in the process of building is, think of it as like the LinkedIn, but specifically for strategic partnering.
Got it.
You can jump into groups, you can create groups, you can connect with people, you can public message, private message, all that sort of fun stuff.
There's a Slack community here too.
Yeah,
that's
Slack community on there as well.
Neat.
And so that's, internal and external, just an additional way. It's kind of interesting talking about Silicon Valley. There's, Slack communities. I mean, that's how they're building communities. Thousands and thousands of people, but they're actually doing it over Slack.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's.
So when you say internal and external, how do you mean? You mean you guys use it internally, but your team is also in there engaging?
Yeah. So both. So we ping each other all day long, like, the traditional Slack that you would do inside of the company.
Yeah.
But then we also totally open it up to have it be a community communications platform.
And that's free for anybody to interact with. So our biz dev organization could interact with that community free of charge.
Yep.
And then the premium is when we want to start going through the 5 phases and all that, which
the different
I went through
courses
with the group in the morning.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Very interesting. And then at what point does it, it's the last question, I'll let you get back to your business, but At what point does the certification become a thing?
Yeah.
Like when do you need that? You know?
Yep. So we have 3 different courses, and people can actually go through the first 3 hours or the first 50% of the first course, which is Partnering Foundations. They can do that totally free as well. We developed a relationship with the University of Central Missouri several years ago, and have just fairly recently launched a certification, SPLP, Strategic Partner Leadership Professional. And so it's really cool. There's no other certification out there that's specifically designed for strategic partnering.
Interesting.
And so if people complete all 3 courses, they can sit for the exam, which is proctored by the University of Central Missouri. And if they complete it, then they get certified. So
interesting. So
our vision is something similar. All of us are probably familiar with PMP, right? Project Management Professional, great certification for project managers. We envision building the brother of that for strategic partnering.
Interesting. So is this content public then? Like if is it out on YouTube or anything like that, or do I have to be logged in to watch it?
Our content is, our courses. It's totally private and kind of locked into our digital learning management system.
And then do you ever syndicate it out to other LMSs?
We do have Partnering Foundations, our first course. We do have that on Udemy. Okay. And so kind of just running a pilot there, if you will.
The reason I ask is because my wife works with a company called Go Skills. And Go Skills, and they at one point were a client of the agency. We helped them with some of their initial sign-up path conversion optimization. Really interesting company. It'd be a great connection for you if nothing else. But the woman that runs it, the whole team is just super smart. But they do online learning, right? And so they do online learning in the areas of things like Photoshop and Word and PowerPoint and that sort of thing. Well, they are now getting to a point where, especially with COVID and everything, a lot of organizations and HR groups are licensing their tech and their content for internal education, and I know they're always looking for good content. So something to think about. I don't know,
definitely.
Interesting. Well, so one of the things I want to do is I'm gonna ask a couple just rapid fire questions here because
don't make it too hard. Don't make it too hard.
Yeah. So, best book other than Partnernomics you've read in the last year.
Built to Last. I totally love that, but I'm going to cheat and throw another one at you as well. The 4 Disciplines of Execution, Chris McChesney.
4 Disciplines of Execution.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I've read a book called Execution. Is that
different?
The 4 Disciplines of Execution.
Yeah. Chris is an absolute rock star, and literally every year in January, I reread it.
No kidding.
The 4 Disciplines of Execution.
All right.
It is money.
All right. I got to check that one out. All right. We go to a bar after work. What are you ordering?
An IPA.
Nice.
With a bourbon after that. Nice. It feels a tough day.
Nice. Have you had any of have you had the BKS IPA yet?
I have not.
Dude.
I've tried to go by there several times.
Don't, because you won't be able to drink anything else.
You won't be able to.
I'm no bullshit. Like I cannot drink another type of beer now.
No kidding.
It is that good.
I'm ready for it.
It's the best beer in the world, and it's in Brookside.
I've driven by there 20 times. I'm hoping that they reopen.
They got to get bigger. Because they do. Have you had BKS? Oh my gosh, they have these IPAs that are just freaking amazing,
out of this world.
But they they're small, right?
Yeah.
So they don't make a bunch of it. Yeah. And during COVID, they've set it up to where you can order online and then you go pick it up. Yeah. It's Thursday night, actually tonight, 7:00. And I'm not kidding you. They sell out in like 60 seconds.
So you can get online, order it, and swing by and pick it up?
Like there's been nights on Thursday nights where
I might be doing that tonight.
I'll have like 3 tabs open and just hit and refresh. And like, it's like the Soup Nazi from
I love that.
From Seinfeld. I remember the other night, like a couple of weeks back, I had everything in there and I loaded up my cart and I hit checkout and my damn Google credit card, or the whatever they call it, Google Pay, my credit card had expired, and so I had to like get my credit card out. And by the time I put my credit card in, it was like sold out.
No way.
Yeah, I mean they sell out in an instant. It's so freaking good. So
I'm dying to check it out, man. I'm going there tonight.
We'll go down there and have a beer. Well, Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time. It's great to see you in person. I'm really glad you came out. And I'm super pleased that Partnernomics is crushing it, man. It's been neat to watch. So
thanks for the opportunity, man.
Yeah, man, love it. We'll post this in a couple weeks, man.
Sweet.
Good to see you, dude.
Thank you. You too.